everybody, I'm back, and today finally doing another episode of Nails, Novels, and Nonfiction. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. On Wednesdays, I try to do a video where I do my nails and I talk about the latest book that I've read. Today I'm just going to be doing a removal. I lost a couple already. These ones will be easy. Let's get started. First thing that I need to do is remove this bling and shorten these down so that we don't have as much filing to do. And for some reason, when I do this part, I can't talk at the same time, so I'm just going to do it really quick. Okay, some of these I just could not get off, so we might have to kind of file the area around it and then get them off. The book that we are talking about today is The 33 Strategies of War by one of my favorite authors, Robert Greene. Talked about a few of his books in some of my other episodes, so you know that I really like this guy. And yeah, so we're gonna just be discussing chapter 1 because his books are all very long and would take a very long time to discuss the whole book. So I'll just be doing chapter 1. And chapter 1 is titled Declare War on Your Enemies, or the Polarity Strategy. So before we get started with the first strategy of war, we need to know that there are different aspects to warfare. The first is self-directed warfare. This is warfare within ourselves. This is the warfare of getting out of our own way. That's what we're talking about first in this first chapter. So life is endless battle and conflict. You cannot fight effectively unless you can identify your enemy, right? Once you have clarity on who your enemy is, inwardly you need to declare war. It can fill you with purpose and direction. So let's talk about the inner enemy. And as you know, Robert Greene uses a lot of examples from history to demonstrate his points. So in the spring of 401 BC, Xenophon, I believe is how you say his name, he was a Greek living outside of Athens, and he received an intriguing invitation from a friend to fight as a mercenary soldier for Cyrus, the brother of the king of Persia. There were some rebellious cities in Persia, and the king's brother wanted to put a stop to it. Xenophon, he accepted the invitation, and he and 10,000 other Greek soldiers accompanied Cyrus and his army deep into Persia. But there, Cyrus admitted his true purpose. He was marching on Babylon and actually mounting a civil war to unseat his brother and make himself the king. Now this made the Greeks, rightfully so, very upset. They had been deceived and they began to argue and complain, but Cyrus offered them more money, so that settled them down. So the armies of Cyrus and the king of Persia met on a field for battle. But Cyrus was killed early on, putting an end to the war quickly. The king of Persia told the Greek mercenaries that he had no quarrel with them, but they did have to leave immediately. He even gave them part of his army to escort them back to Greece because there were violent tribes in the mountains that would be there on their way back, and they would need help fighting them since their mercenary army had been depleted during the battle. So a few days into the march back home, the Greeks realized that the the supplies that the Persians had provided were insufficient. And it was like, could they really trust these Persians? And the Greeks started to argue amongst themselves. Now, the commander of the Greek mercenaries expressed his concern to the commander of the Persian army. The Persian army commander was sympathetic to their concerns and said that his captains and their captains should meet the next day and discuss it. But when they all met up, the Persians immediately surrounded the Greeks and beheaded them. The word got back to the Greek camp, and then all the soldiers started arguing amongst themselves. They accused each other. Some simply just gave up. They felt doomed with their leaders dead. That night, Xenophon had a dream. A lightning bolt from Zeus set fire to his father's house. When he woke up and realized that his dream was telling him that death was staring them in the face. Yet they lay around moaning, despairing, and arguing. The problem was in their heads. Fighting for money rather than for a purpose or cause, they were unable to distinguish between friend or foe. The barrier between them and home was not rivers or mountains or the Persian army, but their own state of mind. Xenophon did not want to die. He believed that if the Greeks concentrated on the enemy who wanted to kill them, they would become alert and creative. If they focused on the treachery of the Persians, they would grow angry, and their anger would motivate them. They needed clarity and direction. Xenophon decided that he was going to be Zeus's lightning bolt. He met with the remaining officers and told them his plan. And he said, and I'll read it to you verbatim here. He said, "We will declare war on the Persians. No more bargaining or debate. We will waste no time on arguing or accusing amongst ourselves. Every ounce of our energy will be spent on the Persians. We will burn our wagons, live off the land, and move fast. We will not for 1 second lay down our arms or forget the dangers around us. It is us or them, life or death, good or evil. Let the Persians make us merciless. We must be consumed with one idea, getting home alive." The next day, a Persian officer came to them to act as an ambassador between them and the king of Persia. But he was quickly and rudely driven away. It was now war or nothing. Roused to action, the Greeks elected leaders, Xenophon among them, and began their march home. They were forced to depend on their wits. They quickly learned to adapt to the terrain, to avoid battle, and move at night. They were able to successfully elude the Persians. It took several years, but almost all of them returned to Greece alive. So I got a big bulk of the acrylic off, and I'm going to wrap these up in acetone and foils. So how do we interpret this for our own lives? Life is a constant struggle and battle. How you confront these difficulties will determine your fate. Your obstacles are not other people or circumstances. Your obstacles are yourself. Your obstacle is yourself. If you lose your sense of direction, if you cannot tell the difference between friends and foes, you only have yourself to blame. Start here, and we'll check. Let these sit for 10 minutes, and then we'll do the other hand. So you want to think of yourself as always about to go into battle. And it has everything to do with your state of mind. Just a simple shift in your perspective can change you from confused and directionless to focused and motivated. And not just motivated, but creative. Without an enemy to focus on, you're kind of lost and you can be easily duped by other people's treachery and you descend into whining and argument. Focus on the enemy. It can be an actual person who blocks you from something you want, or someone who's hurt you or mistreated you. It can be just like an overall value or an idea that you loathe. And don't listen to people who say that like the idea of an enemy is like primitive, or like immoral. They're just disguising their fear of conflict behind a false sense of some sort of value or some sort of high moral warmth. They're trying to trip you up, to infect you with vagueness. Your enemy is your polar star that guides you in battle. So do not be the naive victim. Do not find yourself constantly reacting, retreating to your enemy's maneuvers. Arm yourself with prudence and never completely let down your guard. Feeling wronged or victimized is futile. You are looking inward, concentrating on yourself and your feelings. Instead of internalizing a bad situation, externalize it and face your enemy. It is really the only way out. It's through our battles with others is how we learn what works and what doesn't, and how to protect yourself. Instead of shrinking from the idea of having enemies, embrace it. Conflict is therapeutic. Enemies bring gifts. They motivate you and focus your beliefs. Enemies also give you a standard by which to judge yourself, both personally and socially. And a tough opponent will bring out the best in you. And the bigger the opponent, the greater the reward, even in defeat. It is better to lose to a worthy opponent than to squash some harmless foe. You will gain sympathy and respect, building support for your next fight. Being attacked is a sign that you're important enough to be a target. You should relish the attention and the chance to prove yourself. We all have aggressive impulses that we're forced to repress. An enemy supplies you with an outlet for these drives. At least you have someone on who you can unleash your aggression without feeling guilty about it. So there are always people out there who are more aggressive, more devious, more ruthless than you are. You will have a tendency to want to compromise with them as a way to avoid their aggression. Other types are often brilliant deceivers that see the strategic value and charm, giving you space. They are simply trying to disarm you. With some people, you have to harden yourself to recognize there is no middle ground, no hope for compromise. Your opponent will use your desire to compromise as a weapon against you. Always keep the search for and use of enemies in check. It's clarity you want, not paranoia. By keeping an eye on possible enemies, you are simply being prudent and cautious. Keep your suspicions to yourself so that if you are wrong, no one will ever know. You want to be a person of peace who occasionally goes to war. So yeah, that's the summary of the first chapter of the 33 Strategies of War, the polarity strategy. So I still have this hand to do. I'm going to do this one really quick and then we'll wrap everything up. Okay, so got all the acrylic off. I'm going to buff these so they're nice and shiny and pretty. So yeah, I really pretty much like everything that Robert Greene writes. There's something about it that just makes me feel like I am in control of my own destiny just by changing your perspective on things. So yeah, in this book, The 33 Strategies of War, it's not just about, if you have, like a actual problem with somebody. It can be used for business or just for your own mindset. Okay, all buffed. I'm gonna dust these off and then put some cuticle oil on. I love this part. Feels so good. There we go. Oh, that cuticle oil smells so good. Ah, there we go. Every once in a while I like to remove my acrylics and just have some free fingertips for them a little bit. If you liked this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. Make sure and subscribe. Leave me a comment letting me know what you think of this book. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.